So it wasn't a great look, right? At least it doesn't appear to be to members of the general public and to many pretty prominent media commentators. If you're following this at all, you know that. Dennis Buchanan's a labor and employment lawyer, practices in Alberta and Ontario, and he reached out to me yesterday on Twitter. I really appreciate his feedback, and he said, listen, while there are elements of Commissioner Lucky's performance that are less than impressive, he says, I'd be charitable on this. The Firearms Act is about a 21,000-word document of dense legal drafting plus 17 regulations of varying length and complexity, and that's just one RCMP relevant statute. He says, while saying she doesn't know them intimately might be a poor choice of words, I wouldn't expect her to be able to articulate the Act's requirements in any comprehensive way from memory. Says Dennis, even lawyers seldom give opinions on a statute's effect without reviewing the statute. Let's find out what our first guest has to say about this. Rod Giltaca is the CEO, Executive Director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. He's owned one of Canada's best-known firearm training companies, still an instructor in good standing with the RCMP Canadian Firearms Program. He's trained thousands of Canadians, making his Real Talk debut today. Thanks for making time for us, Rod. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan.
What do you make of Commissioner Lucky's comments there, specifically about firearms legislation? And what do you make, for that matter, of lawyer Dennis Buchanan's rebuttal to my statements yesterday?
Well, it's not unusual for law enforcement to not know the law. I mean, if you're thinking about a general duty member, that's driving around in a police car all day, they're generalists, right? They're not lawyers. And the criminal code, I would have chosen the criminal code as a little more of a better comparison, because it's over 1,000 pages. The Firearms Act is a pretty small set of regulations. But like I said, it's not unusual for police to not know. I think the salient point, or the real rubbing point here of this whole thing, is that this is the commissioner of the RCMP. She's attending a hearing where she's going to be questioned on these things. She's also the commissioner of firearms for Canada as well. And I think it would have behooved her to look into these things before she appeared to the commission, I would imagine.
Rod, for people that aren't 100% familiar with the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, is it accurate to say you're like Canada's NRA? Is that how you describe it?
Well, I definitely wouldn't describe that, because firearm ownership in Canada is not similar to the United States almost in any way. But as far as our organization is concerned, we're very dissimilar from the NRA, because owning firearms in Canada, the reasons you can own them, how they're obtained, our regulatory structure couldn't be more different from the United States. So we're I guess you could call us the reasonable gun lobby. We think that there's a place for regulation, but that regulation has to have a direct relationship to public safety, not just be punitive against people that would be so bold as to get a firearms license.
Commissioner Lucky told an inquiry a couple of days ago, this MCC, that concerns over political interference in the police investigation have been overgrown. She said that she's getting frustrated with questions on the subject. Now, obviously, she's been previously questioned, I think people know, by a parliamentary committee investigating allegations that she had tried to use the tragedy to boost support for the Liberals' gun control agenda. It's pretty obvious why you and your group would have an interest in this commission and in her testimony. What's really struck you as significant over the past couple of days?
Well, I think that people have seen so many scandals and so many ethical breaches by this Liberal government. I hate to call them Liberal, because I used to vote Liberal when they were a centrist party. And this is not your grandparents' Liberal Party or your parents' Liberal Party. But I think people are so desensitized from the sheer volume of scandals and ethical breaches that they don't really, I think it escapes some people what's going on here. There was the largest mass shooting in Canadian history, and it was absolutely brutal. And then, of course, an investigation begins, and it's a very complex investigation with multiple crime scenes, something that the RCMP probably has never even seen before as an organization. And it's really important to the families of people that were affected by this tragedy for them to get justice, meaning that people that provided the firearms, people that smuggled the firearms, people that were involved in this thing, all be brought to justice, because that's part of healing. That's really important. And for the RCMP commissioner to want the public to be to, the most important thing within 2 weeks after, this happened, the most important thing is I need all this information released that would actually truly jeopardize that investigation. Because remember, we didn't know how this individual got his firearms. And the people, even in the United States, that aided and abetted him in obtaining these firearms, they hadn't been caught yet. That investigation probably hadn't even been launched across the border. So it truly did have an impact on the investigation. And the idea that they would jeopardize that ability for the families to obtain justice for political reasons to help the liberals push gun control, it's pretty obscene.
Do you believe that testimony has been damning enough, or perhaps I should say revealing enough, that's a little less editorial, to support the claim that there was political interference? We've seen some former top RCMP brass essentially say that in their estimation or in their interpretation or their experience that there was interference. And then I just quoted reporting by Greg Mercer in the Globe and Mail from 2 days ago. Commissioner Lucky says she's getting tired of the questions, says there was nothing of the sort. I mean, obviously, I know you feel that there was. Your organization's been very clear about that. You've called for the commissioner's resignation. You've called for Minister Bill Blair's resignation. But what have you heard over the past number of days, that you think supports your position on this?
Well, everyone has lined up, including the assistant commissioner of the RCMP, and said, yep, this is exactly what was going on. So it's not my opinion. It's the opinion of pretty much everyone that was in the meeting in question, where she tried to bully basically everyone into the meeting to jeopardize their integrity and jeopardize the investigation in order to help the liberals. So it's not my opinion. It's pretty much everybody else. And I think what shouldn't be lost on people is look at the risk that Darren Campbell and Chris Leather and Scanlon and everyone else that was in that meeting that came forward. These are not, rank and file members that can just go find another job. These are people that have built a career over a lifetime and are willing to throw it all away, risk it all to bring the truth to the surface. And I think we need to stand behind people that have that kind of courage, because, while we all say that we would have that courage to do what's right, it's not everybody will do that. And they all lined up and said the same thing. So, it's starting to get pretty clear who's doing the lying here. And no kidding. And of course, she's tired of answering questions. You would be too if your feet were being held to the fire for an ethical breach so egregious.
Rod, from your position or the position of your organization, what's at stake here?
Well, I mean, for our organization, we are under full attack, and we have been since the Liberals got into power. Canadians have owned firearms in this country since before Canada was a country. And as it applies to handguns, even, we've owned handguns for 100 years. This firearm ownership and sport shooting and hunting and recreational shooting, this is nothing new. Nothing has changed. There's almost virtually no connection between licensed gun owners and firearm-related violence. But this particular set of politicians that are in power right now want to create this connection, want to use us as a way to divide Canadians and use gun owners as the boogeyman and mobilize their base by saying, hey, we're going to crack down on all these people that aren't responsible for firearm-related violence. I mean, this has just got to stop. And I mean, it's not only gun control, right? It's a lot of different aspects of our society where we've experienced this division, this pitting against each other for political gain. It's a strange time, Ryan, and I hope it starts to slow down and come to an end.
I want to put my cards on the table here for the benefit of the audience and to you. I don't have statistical data in front of me. This is a comment based on my anecdotal observations. When we take a look at mass shootings in the United States, many of them, if not most of them, and again, I don't have statistics in front of me, but many of them are committed in particular by younger people, in particular, it seems, by younger men who have acquired the firearms legally, Rod. And I know that right out of the gates, when I asked you if your group is Canada's NRA, you were quick to point out, you said we're kind of like the reasonable gun lobby. You wanted to draw that line between the two of you. But it's a very indelicate position, I think. As a matter of fact, I think that the NRA is almost crass. I think that they're gross in the opportunism that they display in banging their drum and lobbying for their priorities in the wake of mass shootings. But people in the United States and around the world try to wrap their minds how an angry young man 18 years of age, at first legal opportunity to buy an assault rifle, or I know you may not prefer the phrase, but that's what people anecdotally call them or colloquially call them, can get his hands on hundreds of rounds of ammunition and a handgun and a rifle and a body armor and walk into a school and perpetrate mass murder. In Canada, it seems to be a different conversation. And Erica asks a question on our live chat right now, and she wonders, isn't the most important question how many gun crimes are committed with legally acquired firearms and how many are committed with illegal or smuggled firearms? And I know that is an important question. It has a lot of people invoking ideas around like municipal or a federal handgun ban and things along those lines. Before I thank you for your time, I'd be curious to have you address Erica's comment and maybe provide some of your thoughts around what I'm exploring here.
Well, first thing is, I can't answer for the NRA. I can't answer for things that happen in the United States. In the United States, you can buy a semi-automatic rifle just if you're over 18 in most states and have no felony record. So it's completely different. And there's a cultural anomaly happening in the United States that doesn't seem to be happening in other countries as well. So, people that are proponents of gun control always want to pull in the United States because it is an outlier in that way. Iceland, for example, has the same number of guns per 100 people as Canada does. And they had basically no shootings a couple of years ago, not a single one, right? So you have to ask yourself, what's the difference? They have lots of guns. Canadians have lots of guns, nowhere near as many as the United States, right? But these countries that are at peer level have different levels of firearm-related violence. And so you have to ask yourself, what's the difference? It's clearly not the number of guns. And those are questions that people have to ask themselves when they're engaging and talking about these topics. But to answer the question about the connection with licensed gun owners, I would just reference what Chief Raymer of the Toronto Police Service said. He said clearly, and we've posted this everywhere, that licensed gun owners are not the problem in firearm-related violence in Toronto. It is guns smuggled from the United States and used in gang culture and other criminal activity in the city. And so that's a microcosm. I guess it's kind of a really good example. It's an extreme example of firearm-related violence and the reasons, the root causes of that.
Okay, so I'm sure you wouldn't argue against better or more effective intelligence gathering and policing of illegally imported or acquired firearms, right? I mean, that's something I would imagine that a group like you would want to assist law enforcement in combating. It's a better look for an advocacy group or a lobby group like you. A lot of people are going to say, well, listen, Rod Giltaca comes on here, big surprise. He's got the liberals in his crosshairs. There's going to be liberal bashing through this interview. What's a positive contribution to the conversation on behalf of you or your organization that you think would be a good step forward in addressing some of these root causes of gun violence in Canada?
I am a liberal, Ryan.
You're a card-carrying liberal member, is that right?
I live by liberal values. It's
okay.
just I don't identify with this group of people that are running the Liberal Party because it's not liberal, and that's a separate political discussion. But I think what people need to remember is firearm violence is, at the end of the day, it's violence, right? So if we attack the root causes of violence, we'll have not only less firearm-related violence, we'll have less violence altogether. Like of all violent crime, every violent crime that happens in Canada, all told, 3% of them involve a firearm. So it's quite rare as it is, but it's very spectacular when it happens. And when I say these things, I'm not saying it for a good look. I want a safer Canada too. Both my kids are adults. They live in downtown Vancouver, right downtown. I want a safer Canada. I don't want people shot. But you got to think about it in these terms. There's a story circulating around about a guy who smuggled 250 handguns into Canada. He was out of jail in a year, but I'm going to lose my firearms as a result of firearm-related violence. It's ridiculous. So the more that you look into this topic, the more you start to see that people like me aren't the bad guy. I'm saying go tackle violent crime and get out of the lives of people that are contributing, law-abiding members of society. Again, this is nothing new. We've had guns forever. What's new here is the politics around it.
Rod Giltaca is the CEO of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. You can check him out online at firearmrights.ca. Rod, thanks for making time for us. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Ryan.
We're going to get to Elamin Abdul Mahmoud in just a second. I did want to read this.